There we go.
Cool.
All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be presenting today here this evening. My name is Michelle Vanakura, and I am 24 years old, and I live with autism. I was diagnosed with autism on my mom's birthday. It was 10 days before my second birthday in the year of 2000. That was like the time when everything was going on with technology and everything. So that was the year of everything. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York. And while growing up in Brooklyn, my autism affected me in many ways. I had no eye contact. I did not respond to anyone who called my name, and I was completely nonverbal. I didn't like anyone to pick me up. I threw temper tantrums. I liked everything in the routine. So even if one little thing happened, like when we were going for walks and stuff, like change of routine of walking, I would throw a temper tantrum because I did not like it. And I was isolated from my siblings, my older sister Samantha, and my younger brother John. And I didn't really engage with anyone. I was pretty much in my own world. So when I was 3 years old, in August of 2001, my family and I moved to Marlboro, New Jersey. My parents were looking for a good school for me to attend. So as soon as that we moved to Marlboro, I attended a specialized school in Neptune, New Jersey called Children's Center of Monmouth County. It's a school in Neptune, New Jersey for kids with autism and multiple disorders. I was in a secluded classroom with students who have autism like me, and the school did not provide any educational studies. It wasn't really focused on the academic curriculum. It was more so of teaching daily living skills. In my classroom, I was the only girl and the rest were boys, because especially with at the time that autism was more prevalent in boys. So it wasn't that many girls who had more of the signs and symptoms like I've had when I was little. I don't recall that much memories when I was in Children's Center because I didn't have that much awareness of my environment back then. But I do have one memory, and it was from when I did a Hawaiian dance with my second grade teacher at the school, because it was Miss Lauren. She was my second grade teacher, and I did the dance with her, and I remember that because from how much that we practiced together, that it was such a fun memory for me, and I still remember it to this day. So later on, my parents found out that from Children's Center, as you can see from all the pictures here, there was me graduating from everything. Here's the Hawaiian dance I did with my teacher, Miss Lauren. So later on, this was already in second grade, that from Children's Center, my parents found out that I was getting more advanced than my classmates, because at that point, at 6 years old, I said my first word verbally. I said my first word at the age of 6, which is a lot later than most people have, pretty much most people. And a lot of my behaviors improved a lot. Like I wasn't really showing that much temper tantrums. I was following the rules and everything. So my parents were told from the school that I was ready to go attend the school district in my town in Marlboro. So at first, my parents weren't convinced at the time that I was ready, but I knew personally myself that I was ready for more. So that actually leads me to here, where I went to visit my future school, my future public school, and this was in June of 2006. I went to visit Frank Dugan Elementary School. And I remember going inside the building with my dad, and I met the principal of the school, and I met one of the teacher aides in the classroom that I was going to be in with. Her name is Miss Rosso. And in the classroom, I remember as well meeting my future teacher that I ended up having, Miss Dweingert. I was sitting in the desk with my name tag on it and a blue notebook with my name on it. I was shy. I remember being so shy around the other kids, but I was still smiling for the fact that like being in the classroom, like I knew I loved school ever since then. But yeah, this was my first real public elementary school in the town of Marlboro, Frank Dugan Elementary.
Is that you on the end?
At the end, yes, that is me right there.
Very cute.
That's little me. I was 8 years old at that age.
Yep.
I was 8. So in September 2006 was when I attended Frank Dugan Elementary School. I was still taking a minivan bus as my transportation to school. I remember being scared about my first day because of the fact of being in a new school and everything. And I was still very shy, and I didn't know how to make friends or anything. A lot of things had to be taught to me. So attending Dugan really entailed some new challenges that I had to face with. Like I was in a small classroom, but it had more students in it. There was like 15 other students, including me, in it. And this was a special education self-contained classroom in New Jersey. And I was getting support from math and reading because I had no prior education studies before. So that's what the benefit was for me being in a public school. So, but the interesting part was that I was actually placed in a general education classroom for science and social studies. It was very different compared to where I was in a specialized school because there was a lot more students. Yes, there was a teacher in my classroom who was supporting me. I was receiving one-to-one pull-out support if I needed like extra notes or studies with classroom assistants in different subjects. So that was pretty much during my one-to-one sessions. For math, one of my accommodations was using a number line system because of the fact that I didn't have any prior education studies before. And so I had used the number line because it was visual and I was able to see to be able to learn to count and everything. So that was one of my accommodations, as well as sitting in the front of the classroom. So that way I could focus and hear everything what my teacher was talking about. So in Dugan as well, I received a number of therapies. I could go on and on. I had physical, speech, occupational therapy. And just for everybody to know that when I was in Brooklyn, I had all these therapies, including additionally with ABA therapy. I had every single therapy known on the planet and I had a mix of those. And originally at the time, I had those 7 days a week, all therapies mixed. So it wasn't just one kind of therapy 7 days a week. I had a mixture of therapies every day. And so at this point, I was only receiving physical, speech, and occupational. And I remember learning how to hold a pencil when I first learned how to, because I was learning to write. I at first was typing everything because I had no fine motor skills. So it was a big milestone for me when I finally was able to learn how to write and even hold a pencil, because getting the supports like that really helped me a lot. So for me, I believed that being in the public school, getting those supports that I needed, and being surrounded by supportive teachers and students really helped me achieve a lot of my goals that I was able to, that I at first had struggled with, and now I was able to achieve them. So now to transition about this, because of being in Dugan and just being in the public school system in general, I was also eligible for extended school year just because of with being autistic. And so the child study team from Dugan and Special Services Administration allowed me to attend a camp that's for special needs children, and it was over the summer since there was no appropriate summer school accommodations for me in my school district at the time. So I was recommended a camp to attend in my town called Harbor Haven. And the camp was only, the funny thing was that the camp was only 10 minutes away from my home. So it was like so close by, and I had no idea about that. I was passing by it every day. I really enjoyed camp so much. Like I had my camp counselors were helping me make friends, and I made like a ton of friends, as you could tell here in these pictures. And my camp counselor right here is on the left here. But it was such a fun experience for me. I still remember my group of friends, and I ended up going to this camp for 4 years, for 4 summers in a row, before they ended up closing, unfortunately. But it was still such a great experience. Like my group of friends that I made and the educational activities I was involved in, as well as like learning how to swim and go on like with trips, like to learn to play tennis or go rock climbing or everything like that. It was just a lot of fun. So parents, like I really do encourage you to find out from, no matter like what school situation you're in, like to find out from your state or if your child is attending a public school system, to ask them for resources like that about with extended school year, or even like possible camps that are nearby for special needs children, because your child will gain like a lot of skills that I know for me, I felt like I gained a lot, especially with social skills. So I definitely really encourage about with that. So that I really did love the camp. And the best part is that I'm still friends with a couple of them to this day. I still have contact with them. So it's been wonderful about that. So now the transition to when I was in 4th grade, I went to another school because I was transferred to Robertsville Elementary School, and I was there for the last 2 years of elementary school. I had the same teacher, which that was the best part. I'm glad that I still had my teacher with me, and all the same accommodations, modifications. My IEP was transferred to this elementary school. But unfortunately, my class had to move to another school just because of the space issues in the school. So the fact that we didn't have the school didn't have the space to keep our class in was, I was thinking myself later on, now that I think about it, it was just, I felt not right that the fact that you made a special education classroom move out on like creating some kind of space somehow.
Yeah.
You know, it was, even though despite the challenges again that I went through like in Dugan, I had the support. And that's the key, is to have a good support system from teachers. For me, I had from my family too. And I was gaining even more to the fact that in 4th grade, I no longer had occupational and physical therapy. That's how much that I grew from like the skills from having the great kind of therapists that I've had from everything. At this time, I still was receiving speech therapy because I was still trying to communicate verbally in sentences, and the fact that I was still growing on my social skills. So that's why I was still in speech therapy, as well as with as I've mentioned, with communication skills, with pronouncing words. So in the pictures here, I got my teacher, Mr. Wingart, and this were my elementary school. I was in this picture, I was actually going for band. I was attending my band concert that I was in, and that was a lot of fun. I graduated from this elementary school, unlike my other one. My other one at Dugan, I was only in for 1 year, and that was it. So after ending my elementary school years, I attended Marlboro Middle School. This was big for me, especially because of the fact that it was the first school I was ever actually with my siblings. I always attended a school that was not with my siblings because I needed more support. And so and not only that, I went from taking a minivan bus, as I have in this picture right here. I was taking a regular big bus, just like all the rest of the kids do in the community. And I was so excited about that. Like, I never been on a giant bus before until middle school. And it definitely was awesome. But at the same time, middle school was another big adjustment for me. Like, I had some struggles in middle school, such as with using a locker. It's different for everyone, but for me, I had difficulty opening my locker since it was a combination lock. And I used to get so frustrated about it, to the point like I would leave stuff behind there so I could attend my classes on time. And so I told my parents about my frustrations, and they told me about with talking to the school's child study team. And this was like the first time that I learned about with initiating self-advocacy. So I talked to my case manager slash the school psychologist in that school, and my parents did talk to them a little bit as well. But I did more of the talking because my parents wanted me to learn to advocate. So I asked about them if I was able to use a key locker instead, because in my middle school they actually had key lockers for special needs students in the school. So after I talked with them about it, they were able to provide that accommodation for me. So I was so grateful about that. I used a key locker throughout all my middle school years, so I didn't have to deal with accommodation lock anymore. And it made me feel so much better and just less anxious in general. So I was definitely grateful for that. And if it wasn't for me asking for that kind of accommodation, I wouldn't have been able to get through things in life, obstacles like that. So even just for something as simple as opening a locker. So yeah, that was with that. And the fact that I was showing like so much improvement in middle school, that I was growing with my classes and stuff, and I was part of a social skills class in middle school created by my speech therapist. Compared to all my other schools I attended in my public school district, my speech therapist that I had from all my middle school years created a social skills class where I was pulled out from my gym class once a week to attend this social skills class, where I learned to develop social skills like with friendships, and with even as simple as with greetings, all these little things that that I didn't know already, which is so much easier for people. For me, I had to be taught how to do things a lot. But eventually that led me to create my first group of best friends, like on my own. I still keep in touch with them ever since this day. So it is so important. And I really push for parents to do this, is to really advocate in terms of having a social skills program in the school if the speech therapist is able to create that in the school, because it really brings a lot of value of just trying to increase those kind of skills that are important in life. So not only I was showing so much improvement with school, was that at this time, like, I was signed up for Taekwondo classes. It was actually my mom. My mom wanted for me to learn self-defense because it would help me improve on my motor skills and with my self-control. Because it definitely did help reduce my temper tantrums big time. And it ended up being my favorite activity of all time. So it worked out for me, and I will never forget the experience. I was one of the couple of students in the Taekwondo school that was put into regular Taekwondo classes. So I showed that I was able to perform like everybody else. And by the time I was 10 years old, and I forgot to mention this earlier, I actually started Taekwondo in my elementary school years and it went into my middle school years. So I earned my black belt when I was 10 years old, and this was in December 2009. So, and the crazy part is that not only I earned my black belt, but so did my older sister Samantha. We both did it together, and it was such an incredible feeling because I learned that living with autism didn't stop me from earning my black belt. Like I learned that to be more confident in myself and in my skills and everything in life, and I felt so strong inside of me. So just having this opportunity to participate in extracurricular like sports like this was so beneficial for me. And it can be for so many people that are on the spectrum. And doesn't matter if it's sports or even like curriculars like arts and music. It doesn't matter. It's just that it's having that extra piece that that could benefit any skills like social communication and even just improving like self-worth and self-esteem and everything. That's what's needed so much. And that's what really matters. It really does. So throughout middle school, I want to go back to where I was talking about with my classes and everything. And with my IEP, I was still receiving accommodations, like having a teacher aide in the classroom. I was still receiving speech therapy. But in terms of classes, I just kept growing every year. Like I went from being in all small resource classrooms for every subject. 7th grade, I was in a mainstream classroom for math, because that ended up being my best subject. And one of the things is that for me is that if I ever needed clarification of anything, my teacher would remind me to raise my hand so I would learn to ask for help. So, or asking for clarification. So, because I didn't really know how to ask for help. So having that support really helped me out a lot with that. And then in 8th grade, I moved up to almost every single general education class except for science. Science was not my best suit. But it happens for everybody. But my parents continued to meet with the child study team once a year, so every year, to go over my progress and review like any accommodations. And this was actually the first time I attended an IEP meeting. This one in 8th grade was when I joined my parents with it. So one of my accommodations I ended up having was not only having extra time on testing, I actually was allowed to have only 2 choices on multiple choice tests instead of 4, because 4 was so
Ah,
overwhelming for me. Yes, having 4 choices for me on a multiple choice test used to be so overwhelming. There was way too many options. So to narrow it down to 2 made it more relieving for me. So I'm like, okay, I know that it's either this or this one. So it made it less stressful. And I again, just going back to where I was able to make like a group of best friends, it was all because of that social skills program, and getting to be in Taekwondo and everything was huge for me. And I learned how to get through situations with different people and different environments and everything. So that was really important. And I really do encourage for parents to be involved with your kids. My mom was always involved with me growing up and with my siblings. We all, in fact, the funny fact is that we all did Taekwondo together. Eventually, my mom even got her black belt. My brother did. So we did as a family, and it's so important to get your child involved in everything. So after graduating from middle school, I attended Cold Snake High School. I received a sibling waiver to attend Cold Snake since my older sister was a student there in the law program. So this school was not my zoned high school. I actually got to go there because of the sibling waiver. Uh, the sibling waiver. So I actually got to choose between my town Marlboro with their high school or to attend Coltsneck. And I chose to attend Coltsneck because I wanted to be with my older sister. And unfortunately, the first month of my freshman year of high school was difficult. And I recall the experience, and I always share this with anybody that I've ever spoken with, that I remember the first month with my math class, and I was already in all general education classes at the time. I was taking a math test, and my math teacher was giving a warning that everybody had 5 minutes left to take it. The bell rang. I was still working on the math test, and I was telling my teacher that I needed extra time in the math test, and she was like, no. And I'm like, what do you mean? I need more time on the math test, and I'm not done with it yet. And she's like, no, you're done. You don't get extra time to take the test. So I failed that math test because I wasn't getting my accommodation that I needed. So, and this became a struggle in my other classes, not just math. So I I talked to my parents about it, and it turned out my high school never received my IEP from my middle school. And it was horrible because this is why I was struggling. Like the teachers didn't understand what was going on because they had no idea I had an IEP. So my thank goodness to my case manager in my high school, Mr. Schaefer. He was able to fix the solution. He went back and forth conversations with my middle school, and my middle school apologized because they completely mixed up the fact that I wasn't attending my zone's high school and I was attending Coltsneck instead. So everything was situated. So the next thing that happened was that my parents and I had a meeting set up with the case manager, and we went over my discussing about with my autism and about with getting my modifications and accommodations. And after that meeting, everything was resolved. Excuse me. And all the accommodations and modifications were being provided. So during my high school years, I was still receiving speech therapy. I had a teacher aide in the classroom, but it's also more so like later on being more like a second teacher who was a special education teacher. And I was still receiving a accommodation of having extended test time. So every single test I ever taken, I had extra time to do it. So if I needed the next day, I was able to the next day to finish it. So being in a regular school taught me about with how to advocate for things that I needed and for me to reach out to my teachers and not being afraid to ask for help. Because I still did the same thing as I did in middle school, talking to them about it with what was going on, because the situation was horrible at first. So, but despite of these issues and like the obstacles I dealt with and adjusting to the general ed classrooms, the last 2 years of my high school years, I ended up being a peer mentor for the Cooper Connections program. We did activities like arts and crafts, and we attended sports events in my high school. My goal with being in the program is that I want to inspire other students with disabilities who attend the high school by being their mentor and friend. So that was a big part of what inspired me towards where I'm at today, but I'll mention that later. But a big decision came to me in my last year of high school that I no longer needed to have speech therapy. I had speech therapy from the age of 2 to my senior year of high school. And my speech therapist said that I was allowed, given the choice of to stop my therapy because of the fact that I was going to be able to attend college and everything and do a lot more in life. So I chose to stop receiving speech therapy. And this was the first big decision in my life I ever made like that. And it showed that I was becoming independent in general, just including with my decision making. So it's definitely very important to be able to provide choices for your child. Make sure that they're getting choices that they learn in decision making. And it's an important skill in life. And this could be in any environment, home, school, you name it. But it's really important factor. So by the time it was the year 2016, I was given an opportunity, a huge opportunity to share my first ever keynote speech about my journey from early on life to that point in high school. And it was for Dare to Dream. It was a leadership conference in Middlesex, New Jersey. And I was chosen from my high school to represent my high school. We had like different high schools being represented with students with disabilities who represent like leaders in their high school. And I was chosen from mine to share my journey. And it was awesome. Like it was my first ever keynote speech. And I spoke in front of over 500 people, including my family. Oh, I was nervous inside, but I got through it.
That's awesome.
I got through it. I remember the big, like, giant applause at the end from everyone. I was like, oh man. It was definitely a great experience. But and also that year in June, I graduated from high school. I graduated with 4 principal honor rolls. That meant that I got straight A's in my classes. I was in the National Honor Society. I was the academic student of the month in my last month of high school. And I earned 2 awards. One of them was the Exceptional Student Award, which was given by the Special Education Department in my high school. And I got the School Spirit Award, which that was presented from my principal. I like to quote from my principal at the time that he called me an autistic spokesperson. So that was from the awards night there. And that those were like such huge accomplishments for me and achievements for me in Coltsneck. So after graduating from high school, I attended Brookdale Community College. I owe a lot of my success from my community college to the disability services. I right away registered through the disability services and with the case manager there in Brookdale. His name is Ernest Overson, and I got to choose what accommodations met my needs. And this meeting was the first one I completely went by myself. I was not with my parents. I went on my own. Me and my parents talked about it before the meeting occurred, but I went on my own. I did have my dad on the phone, but I went by myself in person. So it was definitely a big step for me. And so at a college level, it's different than at a high school. So in the college level, for me, it was that there's no longer an IEP. That's not what it's called. In this college, they called it as a 504. That's what they called it in this college. And my accommodations were listed on a alert form that I gave to my professors in the beginning of the semester, and I would talk to them about my accommodations. And pretty much overall, almost every single professor I had were very accommodating. And I was getting the extra time, and that was pretty much my main thing. I was just needing the extra extended time on tests because at that point I wasn't needing as much services as I used to. But the key thing here is teaching your child how to advocate, because for them to do well in life, it's teaching those kind of skills and just to slowly approach it like I did, where first I was with my parents for a few meetings, and then this one I was on my own. So, but we did rehearse it before about what I was going to talk about. So I think that's a very important aspect for people to take. But during college, I earned my first part-time job. I gained a part-time job as a teacher assistant for a aftercare program called Champions. I gained the skills to work in the education system through this program. I learned to provide differentiated instruction to all students in kindergarten through 5th grade, including students with disabilities. I worked for Champions for 4 years, and then by the time COVID occurred, it pretty much was by the time COVID happened, and that's when I stopped. But it was huge for me getting a part-time job, and part of it was because of volunteering, like I did in high school. Being a mentor really helped me getting the part-time job. So definitely exposing your child to learn volunteering what is an important aspect as well for gaining employment. So that's my tip for if you're trying to help your child gain employment, start out with volunteering, and then by volunteering you could gain you could definitely have more chance of gaining employment. So that's about that. And then I'm happy to share that back in May of 2019, I graduated my associate's degree in applied science, where for being able to become a teacher assistant. Because right after I graduated, I gained my first school district job as a teacher assistant for elementary school students with autism in a self-contained classroom that incorporated ABA therapy. So I worked for that school district for almost 2 years, and I had I gained a lot of skills in that classroom in terms of the ABA approach, because it is able to be used in the public school setting. It is. It incorporated as well the academic curriculum. Like we followed a regular schedule like the rest of the school was going through. But we also made time that incorporated the ABA therapy curriculum, such as discrete child training and with having naturalistic teaching time where the kids are playing. We would still ask them questions about what they're playing with, or like what color is that the object they're playing with and everything, because it's important for them to still build those skills while they're while in play too. So from working in that classroom, that really, not only with my personal experiences having ABA therapy, which was really good for me because of having the quality therapist that I had, but my professional experiences as a teacher assistant implementing ABA therapy in the classroom, in that type of classroom, I actually ended up returning to school to pursue further for my bachelor's. And it's my bachelor's degree in psychology with a concentration in ABA therapy. So this is the college that I've been attending. It's Purdue University Global. You may have heard of it through the commercials that online and through your TV and stuff. But I found out about this college because of my dad. My dad thought that, like, he's heard really good things about Purdue, and we've heard it from other people. So I filled out an application and everything to apply to school. I was accepted. Not only that, my transcript from my community college was easily transferred, that I only have to be in my bachelor's degree program for 2 years. So I started in 2020, and this college is fully online. So even during the time that it was COVID, like it was COVID at the time when I ended up going back to school online. So for me, it actually worked out attending an online college, like a fully online degree program college versus in person, because I got to focus more on my assignments like at home and like do it at my own pace. And the disability services through this college was incredible too. That everything was through email. I had to email them like all my documents and everything with having autism, and it was automatically accepted in like 1 day. They were so responsive. I everything, like all my accommodations and modifications, they were always emailed to my professors a couple of days before the new semester started, every single time. Like I always get notifications of it whenever they send that out. And every course I've taken so far, wonderful professors here, and they're very responsive. They actually work through with me through the assignments. In this college, by the way, that how their system works in terms of with accommodations and modifications, that it's through the ADA student form. It's the through that, which is different from like our traditional college, like a 504, and different from the public school having a individualized education plan. So like I said, it's very different with colleges, but from my experiences with Purdue, their disability services are wonderful. And I really couldn't have done it with my success so far right now without the student services here, the accessibility services, and having that support. But during the beginning of my bachelor degree program, so here's a major change that happened in my life for my family and I. We actually moved to Florida last year. I grew up in New Jersey for almost 20 years. And last year we moved to Florida. So it was a lot of major changes that happened while I've been in school online. We had our house that was being built still, so we had to live in a temporary like apartment in Florida for half a year last year, and finally we moved into our new construction home last year in November of 2021. And I still been crushing college, despite of like with the major changes of moving and living in a new state. But my GPA so far is a 4.0. That's my
Wow.
GPA right now. I have all A's in every single course that I've taken. And my move to Florida was actually the best thing. Not only that, like since been attending school online, I gained major like employment opportunities. Like I work more than one job. No, I work full time as a paraprofessional for my town school district here in Florida. I'm about to actually finish a whole year, a full school year tomorrow. It is our last day of school here in Florida, so it's very exciting about that. And I work as well for an ABA therapy company here in Florida. I work with Full Spectrum ABA. I am, they actually hire autistic people to, in various roles. For me, I work I actually work with them on 2 roles, and I'm about to enter a 3rd role with them. I work with Full Spectrum ABA as their blogger. I have a lot of content from my own blog website. You may have heard of it as the World of Autism, aka with Exceptional Shell. It's all connected, but yeah. Uh, I I share blog stories on there. I'm an autistic advocate for them. I get to talk with Full Spectrum's providers about what it's like working with an autistic client and what my tips and advice are. And I am about to enter a 3rd role with them, which I'm very excited to share this because this is the first group that I'm actually sharing this with. That I passed an exam back on Saturday to become a registered behavior technician, which means I will be able to provide ABA therapy to autistic clients. So I am so proud of myself and extremely excited that I'll be providing ABA therapy starting this year to kids.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm so excited about that, and to start that journey, because that opened like so many more opportunities for me and everything, and expand myself. So a lot of my work goes through with helping children with disabilities either through the schools and also soon to do ABA therapy. So I'm very excited about that. So to wrap this all up, I wouldn't be speaking here today if it wasn't for my supportive parents and the great school support systems that I've had growing up. And to every single parent and to all the families, like, do not give up hope for your child, because good things can happen for your own special child and slash student. So thank you so much to everyone that's on here today, and have a great night.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was a really informative presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And as I figured, you did answer a lot of the questions I had. I think it's important and encourages the parents of these young people to see how far their kids can go, you know? Mm-hmm. And Sarah says, thank you so much. Absolutely amazing. Thank you for joining us, Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
And this will be really great for my article. I will ask you a couple of questions too, but I just think it's really encouraging for parents of young kids, especially the fact, I think it's amazing that you were nonverbal as a child until 6 years old, and now you're a speaker. That's just so amazing, right?
Thank you. Yeah, the funny thing is that very first keynote speech that I did in high school actually led me to so many other ones later on, and I've done it ever since then. So it's been incredible about that.
That's really great. I don't know if you remember being 6 years old, but Why do you think you weren't speaking yet? Because I'm sure that's what a lot of parents wonder. Why is my child not speaking? I've heard of kids even into their teens that are non-speaking, but to all of a sudden start speaking. Do you know why maybe you didn't as a youngster?
Uh, well, that's a really good question. So I think it's because of how my brain worked when I was little. I think there was things that still weren't connected yet. And by having the therapies that I had, by learning, I think the aspect of just like working on those skills for me really made the connections in my brain to eventually be able to communicate. And it's different for everyone.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna say right away if it's gonna happen or not, because
right.
it's not always about verbal communication. The key is to communicate, because it could be through people. Like, you may have heard like a few weeks ago, about someone who graduated actually from here in Florida. They had someone who graduated from Rollins College, and she's on the spectrum. She's a valedictorian. She did a speech using a software device.
Yes, we
So
posted that article on our page and that speech was amazing. Yeah.
yes, so it comes to show it's about teaching to communicate. It doesn't matter if it's verbally or not, it's just any kind of communication is the key. So
Yep.
that's why I'm not gonna say if it ever happens about with verbally communicating, because I don't think first of all, that's very false to say. I've heard stories about that, and so I want to be straight up honest that it it really, I think the key thing is just to teach communication. It's
Mhm.
just verbal, it's
Yep.
just teaching communication, whether it be through an AAC device, or or text or sign language. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
It's just trying to teach them to communicate. It makes things a lot less frustrating on the person themselves.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sarah has a question.
Okay.
Did your family openly discuss your diagnosis with you? And did you find it helpful to know? Sarah says her son is almost 6 and he receives ABA and additional IEP services, but they've never told him that he's autistic or different in any way. Did your parents discuss that with you as a youngster?
So, Sarah, that's a really good question. And I get asked this quite often. So, I was diagnosed early on at the age of 2. I didn't really learn that I was autistic until I was in 6th grade. The way that I learned was my family and I were at my family friend's house one day. We were watching a documentary about Dr. Temple Grandin. Everybody knows who Dr. Temple Grandin is. But if you don't, she's an autistic woman who's very well known as a animal science professor, and her inventions for with connecting how with animals, like with cows and everything, is just truly incredible, and how she's a visual thinker. But after watching her documentary, so my parents kind of said about like how I was similar to her, how I think differently, how I'm kind of visual like her, and how there are certain situations that I don't understand and most people do, but it's okay. It's just there's things that I had to be taught more so of. And so that's where I kind of learned that I was different. And then my parents kind of explained about with me living with autism and everything. So it it did, for me, it was more so positive, because I learned a part of me that I didn't really wasn't aware of. And that's where like I tell people this, because like, you always like want to know like why you are the way that you are and stuff. And like I I felt like in middle school I was learning that awareness more so of myself. and my environment too, because the fact that when I was little, I wasn't really too aware of anything really. So I felt like I was growing awareness in general in middle school. So that it was positive for me. It helped me
So
out.
you think it helped you understand yourself a little better?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think it helps if parents tell their children at an even younger age, or do you think there's an age they might not understand it?
It depends on your child themselves because the fact that autism is a spectrum, everybody has different abilities. So it's about it's not gonna happen at the same time as I did. It can happen earlier, it can happen later. It's just that's why I always tell people you have to be involved and be aware of your child because you want them to know that okay, like they're gonna eventually like know this part and stuff, but you have to like observe them and like and see how much they've grown and everything to know when it's time. So as I've said it again, it's different for everyone. You know, as soon as like a big thing for me like was the awareness part, and I feel like that's a big thing in the autistic community because of the fact that I having that awareness and everything. So
It
yeah.
helped you understand yourself. You wouldn't want a child to be thinking, why am I different? What's wrong with me or something?
Yes, exactly.
It sounds like your parents were very supportive and encouraging. That's great.
They were. They absolutely were. And that's important for parents to be like that around their child.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So another question I had, you spoke about your public schooling, and I was going to ask if it was difficult for you. And you really told us well about that progression through school and the classes you had. And that's really great. I'm curious, I homeschool, and one reason I have always homeschooled is, you think, oh, kids are so mean. Kids can be so mean sometimes. Did you experience kids being mean to you in public school or judgmental?
A little bit. Like I had a little bit where there was classmates that, especially being a new kid, and I know in third grade I remember one classmate that didn't like me, but I didn't really could tell if they didn't like me or not. But mostly it was inclusive. I had classmates that would come up to me and like introduce themselves. They would talk to me and everything. And I think what was great about with public schooling for me was the fact that there are nice people.
Yeah,
You're gonna have mean people, you're gonna have nice people. That's the reality of with
for all of us.
yes,
Yep,
exactly.
that's
Exactly. So
good.
I what I've learned, and this is what now that I take that from my own experiences and I put that now as a full-time paraprofessional, with my student I work one-to-one with, and they're in a general education classroom. So, and for them they live with a physical disability. So they use a walker to get everywhere. So having, you know, every classroom is gonna have kids like that are nice and they'll include and stuff, and you have kids that have a little bit of a different personality and everything. But the key for schools, especially early on, is to teach those kind of skills of inclusion. Because if it's taught early on, it's more likely people are going to include other people who have disabilities and everything. So it's so important for school systems and to include children early on.
Yeah, and that's why awareness these days is very important. And it's much better, much more awareness nowadays than when I was a kid in school. So I imagine it's got to be getting a lot better. And
It,
hopefully more kids are aware of other kids and how we're all different.
it I could even tell, like for me, like more than 10 years ago, being in elementary school, like the kids have a lot more of an understanding. They do.
That's
I think
great.
that the more that like the kids have learned from others and stuff, like it's changed a lot. Parents are getting more educated and stuff through online, attending conferences, workshops, everything. So there's definitely a lot more of awareness and education. Now it's just the advocacy part is the next big step.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it's like I said, I could tell your parents were very encouraging. Did they have any reservations about you going to community college? I mean, I guess you were still able to live at home during that time. So
Uh,
it's not like you were going away to college, but do you think they worried about you or wanted to shelter you a little bit?
um, so when it comes to a community college, that was like the main thing I was actually only able to get into really because I never took the SATs or ACTs like everybody else did. But the fact with just attending community college, which I completely forgot to mention this before, way earlier before that, I I went through with driving. I passed my permits test in high school. I practiced driving through a driving school with my parents too. On my 17th birthday, I went for my like a couple of days after because my birthday was on MLK Day. So I had to take my driver's test like a couple of days later. And I passed my road test on the first try, all because
Wow, great.
of the practice that I got from my parents and the driving school. So I I've been driving ever since then. I still drive today. I still live at home with my family because it's financial more so, like trying to save money and everything. But it doesn't matter. It's just that the fact that I've been more independent in terms of like I drove myself every day to classes for my community college and to work. Like even now, I do a lot more by myself in terms of transportation, and now I've been learning how to pretty much more so handle money more now myself. So that's community college again, it was just because of the fact that I didn't take the college exams like everybody else did. But this community college, it was more accepting. Like I got accepted right away. I applied, I got accepted right away. The only thing I had to take was just their entrance exam, which was a lot easier than the SATs or ACTs. And I took like only like one or two remedial courses, which were like the easier courses before the college level. But but yeah, it gave me the opportunity to go to college. And I think I honestly, with community colleges, yeah, I must have saved a lot more money.
Yeah, I went to
Parents
community
like,
college too for that reason.
yeah, that's another reason why I went to community college because it helped my parents out in terms of
Yeah.
money for me to attend college. So that's a big factor. But still, I still encourage for children like as they get older and after high school, go to college. Like you will get to not only enjoy courses that you are into, unlike in regular school where you're taking classes you didn't like, you're taking more sort of courses that are you want to go for in your career. And now I've been doing that in when I transferred to Purdue after my community college. That was also another more accepting college. And the fact that they're fully online was helpful for me so I could still work. So
Yeah.
it helps me out a lot.
Yeah, I think that's really encouraging to parents who think their kid is going to struggle with school, that they can totally go on to college in many different ways.
There's a lot of different ways to do it. You could be fully online to going in person. There's a lot of different options out there and everything. It's just about motivating,
Yep.
motivating.
So I just had a couple more questions. The first one is kind of for me personally.
Yeah.
Many of our children have oversensory meltdowns, and we struggle with how to help the child through this or avoid them before they even happen. You spoke a little bit about how you had that problem as a youngster. In your professional experience now, does it happen more during a certain age? And what advice would you give the parents to help them alleviate meltdowns?
Okay, so meltdowns are pretty much when it comes to when it comes to the environment being so overwhelming. There's a difference
Yeah,
between meltdowns and temper tantrums.
yeah,
There's a huge difference. Meltdowns are more so of the environment being so overstimulating. So, like when I had when I was in my first public school district job back in New Jersey before moving down here to Florida, I had a student that completely melted down from being in a assembly with all the different kids, and that it was so loud for them, and they just completely melted down. So for them, just having them come out from the assembly to be in a much more calmer environment helped them out a lot. So it depends on the situation. So, and the environment, what's going on. That's why you have to be so, for parents, you have to be so observant of what's in the environment, because there are ways you can prevent meltdowns to happen. Like if you have a child who is sensitive to loud noises and you're going to enter like to, let's say, a concert, you want to go to a concert, make sure your child has headphones if they're sensitive to loud noises. Also be in the area that is a little more calming. Like if it's a big space and you have a lot of people, make sure that there's like a section where it's like less people around, like in the back or like the front corner, whatever it is, just so that way you can still enjoy being where you're at, and they can too. So that's some ways. It's always about being prepared. So that's, and with meltdowns, like if it is already occurring, from my experiences, I actually don't like when people talk to me when I'm going through my meltdowns, because then there's more that's going into me than there needs to be. I'm already dealing with the fact that it's too much for me to be in this. Why are you talking to me while I'm going through it? So I, and then once I'm calmed down, I actually like when I get a hug afterwards, because it just makes me feel better, like when someone cheers me up after going through a difficult, challenging time like that. So, but it's different for everybody. Again, it's just, you know, you gotta really pay attention to your child and or your student if you're in the school environment. And so that way that way less meltdowns can occur, but they could still happen. You know, it just depends on the person at like at any age it can happen. For me, it was early.
Yeah, I was wondering if you noticed them letting up at a certain age.
Yeah, it can be at any time, but there are approaches to reduce that from happening. There are. It's just about taking it like beforehand and stuff. Like there's things that you could bring and stuff with you. So always be prepared.
Great. And the final topic I wanted to talk about, running the special needs group here, I try to be sensitive to everyone's opinions and we try to hear each other out. And I love it for that. And I love that everybody is non-judgmental. If someone has a certain belief, you know, we try to accept each other. That's what we're all about. But there is a big community debate as to whether or not ABA therapy is beneficial or if it may even be harmful. There's a lot of debate in the community of people referring to it as abuse. Now, I guess it depends what ABA therapists learned in schooling. I know it's changed over the years a lot. So what would you tell parents who are being told now that maybe they should consider ABA therapy, but they're not sure from what they hear?
So, for me, I'm gonna say for me personally, like, uh, especially like for me, when I did receive ABA therapy, it's completely different than it is now. But it is also the fact that because of how much therapists have learned over time, and this could be for any kind of therapy, because back in our history, even with all other kinds of therapies, that they weren't as effective as it is now. And the fact that we have that with ABA therapy, as much as like therapists have been learning so much more hands-on, when it comes to working with autistic people. And the fact that there's a lot more autistic people like myself that are sharing their perspectives, because back in the day there wasn't as much of that. There wasn't enough proof of it at the time that, that this helps them and stuff. Or yeah, unfortunately there are people who still have I've heard stories of their personal experiences with it. And part of it, and this is what they teach a lot now when it comes to the ABA field, and I'm glad I know this, that when it comes to the quality of a therapist, I think I know the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, they have been which it was actually, they were created the year I was born in 1998, as a matter of fact. And thanks to them, they actually make sure that they have quality therapists that are providing ABA therapy, behavior analysts, and you name it. So a lot of it is education, a lot of it is research that has been changing a lot. And the fact that the amount of therapy depends on the child. For me, I had a mix with other therapies, but I had ABA therapy like 3 to 4 days a week. So, along with other therapies. So, it was intense, but it was beneficial for me. I needed it. So, it's different for everyone, but the fact that the skills I've learned, they were so personalized. Like, I learned to use a visual schedule to transition from one place to another. I remember being reinforced a lot with with NMMs, but now that for me studying with that, like I don't agree with food being the main resource for as a reinforcement or a reward. It has to be mixed with other approaches, like with praising, like saying, like for example, with a child with toilet training, like great job of going on the toilet, like all that. That's little praises like that mixed with other reinforcers like toys or like that. It's about mixing it so that way the whole point is to motivate an individual to keep performing the skill and everything. So it really was beneficial for me. I've worked with students who I was fortunate enough that I had one student who I helped them learn to communicate with their AAC device. In the beginning of the school year, they were only saying one-word sentences. Before I left, they were saying 3 to 4 word sentences, all because of the work that I've done with them through approximately praising them for how much they were using their AAC device for gradually from 2 words to 3 words to 4 word sentences and stuff. I would push for that goal and everything for them, and I was really proud of myself for that, to help a student get towards with them communicating more And it's an important skill. But yeah, again, my whole point when it comes to with ABA therapy is that it is still evolving, especially with a lot more voices that are coming out from the autistic community. So I know for me it was beneficial. You'll still hear a lot of those stories about that from people who did not have as great experiences, but also keep on looking at the facts that happened in the past. You can't just look at the past, you have to look at the whole picture in order
Mhm.
to understand that, like, of how much this therapy is helping.
And it's evolving and only going to get better, I imagine.
Yes, absolutely. We have like here in Florida, like at Full Spectrum ABA, the company that I work with, we have a ton of autistic advocates who are working as therapists now. We have 2 behavior analysts who are on the spectrum. We have other RBTs like now myself that I just passed the other day, and I'm going to be starting to do therapy work. So uh we it's also about with companies hiring people with disabilities. That is what makes the difference too, in terms of like shaping everything, including what people used to say about with therapies and everything.
Mhm. That's great. I think that'll really encourage a lot of parents who are unsure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that was all of the questions I had.
So
So thank you so much for coming and speaking to us today. And
absolutely.
definitely feel free to stay in the group and lend encouragement to these moms anytime you see, a question arise.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I'll,
If anybody has any questions and everything, actually, I have a slide here that people could follow me as Exceptional Shell at Self Advocate MV on my social media. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok, YouTube. So you can follow me there. And especially I will in the group as well. Thank you so much, Kristen, about that. I will, if any parents want to ask me questions based on from my experiences and everything, go right ahead.
yeah, and I'm following your page, so I'll keep in touch, and I'll ask more questions if I have any as I get to writing my article, and I'll share it with you, and I'll find you on YouTube too. Sarah says,
Awesome.
thank you. Have a great night. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm looking forward to it. So I guess I'll attempt to change all of Jenna's settings back.
Yeah.